Good morning and welcome to Defense Diaries. I am your host, Bob Mata, and we are here to figure out, did he do it? See what I did there? Did he do it? I mean, that was low-hanging fruit for me. So if you're not aware, music mogul, apparently incredibly shitty human being, Sean Puff Daddy Diddy Combs, was indicted on federal charges last night, taken into custody in NYC. There's going to be a presser, which Diz, can you figure out where we should stream it while I'm going through this? I see that Law and Crime has it. They've got kind of a double panel. It looks like that is going to be starting at 10 my time, 11 Eastern, I believe, is what Dizzy told me. So Dizzy, of course, was able to procure us the indictment, which I would very much like to read to you, if you're okay with that. You guys cool with me doing a little reading? Should we do some morning reading? Should we read? I think we should read. Should see what they got on this dude. We've been waiting. In the meantime, it sounds like there's some brawling going on over in the Adelson courtroom. It sounds like, I think there's a legitimate argument to be made. Not that I give a shit about Chuck Adelson, but I do care about our rights in this country. And it is a little peculiar to have your former defense attorney now potentially cross-examining you on a trial that isn't yours as a witness that's been subpoenaed. So basically what it sounds like is going on over there, and then we're going to dip back over to Diddy, is that Adelson's lawyer is complaining that, look, Rashi can't, like, this dude can't cross him. Like he was his lawyer. He's got all, he's like, whatever happened to privilege? It's like, how can you have a lawyer cross-examine his former client in a case wherein it's involving the same set of circumstances? It's weird. It's interesting. At some point today, I'm gonna watch it. If it's worth going live on, I'll probably replay it and go through it if it's as interesting as it sounds to me. I haven't kept an eye on it because I am yeah, I'm gonna try to do a Delphi. There's not a ton going on about Delphi right now. It's eerily quiet, which, to be honest with you, is to be expected as trial is coming up very, very quickly. I don't know if they're going to appeal to Scoyne. It's not really an appeal. It's what they call an original action. They tried to file the interlocutory appeal, which Judge Gull refused to certify. So that is uh technically supposed to be the first step. Like, so if you guys remember back when they were removed, one of the counter arguments against reinstating them is that they didn't follow the attorneys didn't follow the proper procedure, in the sense that in order to go up to the Supreme Court of Indiana, you are supposed to try to file an interlocutory appeal. If that is not certified by the judge, the trial judge, at that point, then you can go up to the Supreme Court and say, okay, well, we need extraordinary relief because the trial court is refusing to certify this and hear this issue. So I don't know. I have not heard any buzz. Um, yeah, my podcast voice. I always have my podcast voice. You're just hearing me not scripted. I always have my podcasts. My voice is my voice. It's always, but when I'm scripted, I'm more measured. So you know, there's that. All right. So Diz, let's see. She's so amazing. Have I told you guys how much I love Dizzy? I love Dizzy. All right. So Diz has that thing up for me to keep an eye on. All right, Diz. I brought that over to my second screen. So when you see that thing, when you see the U.S. attorney stroll out, good day, sir. Good day, madam. I'm the U.S. attorney. When you see him walk out to the mics there, Diz, let me know. Because in the meantime, let's read. It's time to read. All right, let's go. Okay. Oh, dun, dun. Okay. Let me shrink this guy down. Oh, that's just some rando Calrissian walking out of the federal building. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. Yeah, Dizzy. What did we decide? All right. So when I'm muted, there's a sound effect you'll play when you're trying to alert me and I'm not looking at the chat. Play a different sound effect. Let's pick one. It'll be like our safe word. So it's your choice, Diz. You get to pick it out. You do it. What is that? Oh, these are all cool little things. Okay. All right. Sorry. I'm a little discombobulated. Exciting. There's a lot of things going on today. Okay. So let's start checking out what they got on the Didster. Let's see exactly what they've got on this guy. It's all right. So, sealed indictment, which was unsealed this morning, and per usual, Dizzy was all over it. I think I saw Enton tweeted that it was unsealed, and then I said, "Dizzy, it's unsealed." And I think in 3.5 seconds, she's like, "Got it." So, she's the best, man. She's the best. All right, so count one: racketeering, conspiracy. Oh yeah. Ooh wee. Oof. Oof. All right, let's see what they got. All right, for decades, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love. The defendant abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. I could tell you right away, if you guys remember, like federal indictments just hit differently. Like I've talked about this the last time we read a federal indictment, and it was on the Birchmore case. Um, they're just really well written. Like we're gonna get all the flavor. They're gonna come at us with the flavor, all the flair of like flame throwing this guy. Okay, to do so, Combs relied on the employees, the resources, and influence of the multifaceted business empire that he led and controlled, creating a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other crimes, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. The only thing we're missing is murder. Murder. I mean, they just haven't found it yet. Like, anybody who's doing this kind of shit, man, and I'm not suggesting it's Diddy personally. It's Diddy having people do his, having people do his dirty work for him, as I imagine. But let's stick with what he's been charged with. Let's not speculate. All right, paragraph 2, Sean Combs. All right, I'm not going to do the AKA Puff Daddy. As much as it was fun to do the first time, I'm not going to do it a second time. Well, maybe I will. AKA Puff Daddy, AKA P. Diddy, AKA Diddy, do it, AKA PD, AKA Love. The defendant operated his business headquartered at various times in Manhattan and LA under a variety of United States-based corporate entities, including Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, and Combs Global, collectively the Combs Business. Corporate entities in the Combs Business included, among other things, record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirits business, a marketing agency, and a television network and media company. Paragraph 3, at all times relevant to this indictment, Sean Combs, the defendant, engaged in a persistent and pervasive pattern of abuse toward women and other individuals. This abuse was at times verbal, emotional, physical, sexual. As part of his pattern of abuse, Combs manipulated women to participate in highly orchestrated performances of sexual activity with male commercial sex workers. Wow. At times, Combs and others, acting at his discretion, made arrangements for women and commercial sex workers to fly to Combs locations. Combs ensured participation for the women by, among other things, obtaining and distributing narcotics to them, controlling their careers, leveraging his financial support, and threatening to cut off the same, and using intimidation and violence. So this guy's a giant piece of shit. He is like, so I think Mandy or Dizzy, one of the two of them, is like, oh yeah, it's he's hired the same dude that represented Keith Raniere, the Nexium weirdo, who I think went down for 120 years for basically the exact same shit, except he was using like a cult. This guy just had the money to where he could buy it. He didn't have to create the cult itself, even though I'm sure it was pretty cult-like over at Diddy World. Okay, so physical abuse by Sean Combs. The defendant was recurrent and widely known on numerous occasions from at least in or about 2009 and continuing for years. Combs assaulted women by, among other things, striking, punching, dragging, throwing objects at, and kicking them. These assaults were at times witnessed by others and included one instance at a Los Angeles hotel in or about March of 2016, which was captured on video, which we've all seen. If we haven't, I'll pull it up. It's disgusting. In a Los Angeles hotel in or about March of 2016, which was captured on video and later publicly reported, where Combs kicked, dragged, and threw a vase at a woman as she was attempting to leave. When a member of the hotel security staff intervened, Combs attempted to bribe the staff members to ensure silence. Combs' violence was also not limited to these women. It extended to his employees, witnesses, to his abuse, and others. 5, Sean Combs, the defendant, used the Combs business, including certain employees, to carry out, facilitate, and cover up his abuse and commercial sex. Those employees, including security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors and other close associates acted as Combs' intermediaries, and their conduct was facilitated and assisted by Combs' control of the Combs business. Now, the shame about this is that we are not going to be able to watch this trial if this guy doesn't plead out. And I do not like this guy's going to fight it just like Keith Raniere did. But federal cases, it's a no-go. No streaming. No streaming. Just can't do it. You can't do it in federal court, or they just don't allow for it. They're crazy about cameras in federal courts. All right, the Combs Enterprise. So now we're going to start breaking down. So give you a little background. Remember, we're still just on the first count here, which of course was the racketeering. Okay, so the Combs Enterprise from at least in or about 2008 through on or about the date of the filing of this indictment, Sean Combs and others, known and unknown, were members and associates of a criminal organization, the Combs Enterprise. Members and associates of the Combs Enterprise engaged in an attempt to engage in, among other activities, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution, coercion, and enticement to engage in prostitution, narcotics offenses, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. I mean, these are heavy-duty charges. They're heavy-duty charges. The Combs Enterprise, including its leadership, its members, and its associates, constituted an enterprise as defined by Title 18 of the U.S. Code, 1961, paragraph 4. That is a group of individuals associated, in fact, although not a legal entity. Hold on, I got to clear my throat. Pardon me, my morning voice is still very much with me. All right, the Combs Enterprise consisted of Sean Combs, the defendant, entities within the Combs business, including but not limited to Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, and Combs Global. Individuals employed by and associated with the Combs business, and others known and unknown. Boats and hoes, right, Diddy? Boats and hoes. Boats and hoes. 8. The Combs Enterprise constituted an ongoing organization whose members functioned as a continuing unit for a common purpose of achieving the objectives of the Combs Enterprise. The Combs Enterprise was engaged in, and its activities affected interstate and foreign commerce. That's what makes it federal. There's always trigger words which make things federal. That's why you always see bank fraud, wire fraud. Those are the things where anything that there's interstate commerce, that's what triggers federal jurisdiction. If you're wondering why, like there was obviously money going through the interwebs and through money transfers, email, like all kinds of stuff. This thing is dripping with federal, like in terms of why the feds were able to go after him. Because remember, you always have to be able to, you always have to be, as the federal government, you always have to be able to attach a statute to it, which is always going to incorporate either diversity jurisdiction, meaning that you have parties in 2 different states, or you've got a federal statute that has been violated, which is going to typically include interstate commerce. Okay, so that's what's going on here. I mean, but if you cross lines, even physically, it becomes a real issue federally for you, because like I've told you during the Birchmore thing, the U.S. attorneys, the Fed cases are a whole different beast. They rarely ever lose. Like they take their time. Like if this was some state shit, they probably would have brought Diddy in like right after they did the search, just jumping the gun, not taking their time, not getting their ducks in a row. Feds, they're gonna have their ducks in a row. I guarantee you. They're gonna come hard. They're already like this is not a surprise to Diddy. I'm just gonna let you all know. I mean, his lawyers knew he's been staged in New York preparing for this day. They didn't have to kick his door in. Like he turned himself in. So like they're doing it civilized, like, and I assure you that the conversations prior to the actual taking him into custody have been taking place between Diddy's attorneys and the U.S. attorneys. Like they're seeing they've been seeing if they can work something out, and they will continue to negotiate. But the feds, when they have you over the barrel, you just don't. They're going to want to do a proffer. They're going to want him to make admissions. The federal sentencing guidelines are super intense. They're very different than state guidelines. You get credit for taking accountability for your actions in federal court. Like it's quite literally you get points off, which means years in federal court. You get points off for helping them, for snitching, for turning state's evidence or feds evidence. I mean, they encourage you, and it's all right there in the guidelines. So it's not like a surprise. It's like that's the difference between state and federal when you're trying to negotiate sentencing guidelines. It all ends up with a number, whatever number you land on and that's where the battle is between the government and defense attorneys is negotiating where that number is, because you'll say certain things should apply. The government will say, nah, we don't think so. We don't think it applies. Or they'll say that they think certain things apply, and we'll argue, no, we don't think it applies for this reason. So it's a whole thing. One day I'm going to have Allie give you guys a tutorial on the federal sentencing guidelines. It's interesting. It's a little bit dry, but it's interesting. It really is. So how was the old Adelson? What happened? What happened? Is it trial still going? Somebody tell me in the chat. Okay, these individuals included certain Combs business employees, such as members of the Combs security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors, as well as others, as close associates of Combs. The purposes of Combs' enterprise. The purposes of his enterprise include the following: operating a global business in the media, entertainment, and lifestyle industries, including, among other things, record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirits business, a marketing agency, and a television network and media company. B, preserving, protecting, promoting, and enhancing the power and reputation and brand of Sean Combs. Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Diddy, PD, Love. As a musician, entrepreneur, and figure in the entertainment industry. Enriching member. Oh, hold on. I gotta let my dog in. You guys, here, I'm gonna pull this up. You guys can read that paragraph. I hear him crying. All right. I apologize, y'all. My puppy needed me. All right. So again, we were talking about the purposes of the enterprise. Okay, preserving, protecting, promoting, and enhancing the power of the Combs enterprise, including the power of its leader, Combs, through violence, use of firearms, threats of violence, coercion, and verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. This guy is going down. The rise and fall of Diddy Combs. Diddydoit. Diddydoit. Of course he did it. Fulfilling the personal desires of Combs, particularly those related to the Combs' sexual gratification, including through the exploitation of women and the use of commercial sex workers. Enabling Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise to engage in unlawful acts of violence, including sexual violence, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for the purposes of prostitution, coercion, and enticement to engage in prostitution, narcotics distribution, and other crimes, and concealing the commission of such acts. G, securing absolute loyalty from members of the Combs enterprise, including through acts of violence and threats. You have taken the Diddy blood oath. The blood oath. Let's go. You win. You win with me. I'm Diddy. Ugh. See, I'm not gonna lie. I love when self-made king dipshits get chopped down. I love it. I love it. You know, it's like get all this money, and instead of being like a good person, you turn into a giant flaming piece of shit. Like, I can't do right. Get that kind of money, do right. I'll tell you right now, if I was a billionaire, if I had Elon Musk money, there would be no homeless people in the United States. I would make it my absolute life goal to get rid of homelessness, to make sure that everybody in this country had a roof over their head. It's insane to me. Like I see these things like you could feed an entire nation on, it's like, oh my God. Homelessness and, people starving. It's too much. It's too much. Like the distribution of wealth in this country is like fucked. Okay, protecting the Combs, but I'll get off my soapbox right now. Yeah, money can definitely corrupt a person. And most of the times it does. Because with money comes power, whether it's actual or imagined by that person. It can create a real problem. And we're seeing it right here. This is what happens. I don't think little Diddy growing up as a kid had dreams that he was going to be federally indicted on running racketeering and sex trafficking. Couldn't have been the goal, right? Hey, Bert. Oh, I thought we were talking Sesame Street there, Missy. Okay, protecting the Combs enterprise and its members and associates, including the Combs, from detection and prosecution by law enforcement authorities through acts of intimidation, manipulation, bribery, and threats of retaliation against individuals who witnessed the crimes committed by members and associates of the enterprise. So it's like, here you go. I'm gonna pay you off. You know what I mean? That's like oh, you didn't see me just rape that woman. Here's $10,000. Means and methods of the enterprise. Among the means and methods by which Sean Combs and other members of the associates of the Combs enterprises conducted and participated in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise include the following. Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise wielded the power and prestige of Combs' role at the Combs business to intimidate, threaten, and lure victims into Combs' orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Come on, girl, you want to get with me? Come and get with me. Come on, you see my boat? All his shit. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referenced to as, among other things, as freak offs. So he was intimidating these women. So like he was paying to basically have people perform like pornos live in front of him. Or like he'd have big parties with people just like sitting around banging each other. What a freak, dude. People are so weird, man. Freak offs were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during. Oh boy. And often electronically recorded. Ah, oh, the fall of an empire. In arranging these freak offs, Combs, with the assistance of members and associates of the Combs enterprise, transported and caused to be transported commercial sex workers across state lines and internationally. Freak offs occurred regularly, sometimes lasted multiple days, and often involved multiple commercial sex workers. During freak offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept videos that he filmed of victims engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. After freak offs, Combs and the victims typically received IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and drug use. So this guy was basically paying for harems, it sounds like, just like big old pork fest, like where he's keeping everybody drugged and yeah. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise include high-ranking supervisors, security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and other Combs business employees. Facilitated the freak offs, among other things, booking hotel rooms for the freak offs, stocking the hotel rooms in advance with the required freak off supplies. Dizzy, I'm going to need a freak off supply emoji, please. Including controlled substances, baby oil. We need a vat of baby oil. Uh, lubricant, lube, extra linens and lighting, cleaning the hotel rooms after the freak offs to try to mitigate room damage, arranging for travel for victims, commercial sex workers in Combs to and from freak offs, resupplying Combs with requested supplies. I need more lube. I need more lube. Resupplying Combs with requested supplies, delivering large sums of cash Combs to pay the commercial sex workers, and scheduling the delivery of the IV fluids. In or about March of 2024, during the searches, here we go. Now we're going to get to find out what they found out in the house. During searches of Combs' residence in Miami, Florida, and LA, law enforcement seized various freak off supplies. Hey, I got a big tub of goo. It looks like lube in this room. Can you imagine that? Just probably dildos all over the place. Law enforcement seized various freak off supplies, including narcotics, and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube. I hate to laugh, but it's oh, it's so much. It's just so much. Hmm. Combs subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse to cause the victims to engage in freak offs. Combs maintained control over his victims, though, among other things, physical violence, promises of career opportunities, granting and threatening to withhold financial support, and by other coercive means, including tracking their whereabouts, dictating the victim's appearance, monitoring their medical records, controlling their housing, and supplying them with controlled substances. During and separate from the freak offs, Combs, among other things, hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims at time by their hair. These assaults often resulted in injuries that took days or weeks to heal. Combs also threatened victims' careers and livelihoods, including if they resisted participating in freak offs. Victims believed they could not refuse Combs' demand without risking their financial or job security, or without repercussions in the form of physical or emotional abuse. Combs also used the sensitive, embarrassing, and incriminating records that he made during freak offs as collateral to ensure the continued obedience and silence of the victims. So, I mean, he was basically using the videos to blackmail him for compliance. D, members and associates of the Combs enterprise, including Combs security personnel, at times carried firearms. On more than one occasion, Combs himself carried or brandished firearms to intimidate and threaten others, including victims of and witnesses to his abuse. In or about March of 2024, during the searches of Combs' residence in Miami, Florida, and Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 AR-15s with defaced serial numbers. It's a no-no, as well as a drum magazine. E, members and associates of the Combs enterprise enabled Combs' control over victims by following his directions regarding financial payments to victims, advancing or suppressing the victim's career opportunities, and acquiring the controlled substances Combs used to keep the victims compliant. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise at times witnessed Combs' violence towards the victims or the victims' injuries caused by Combs without intervening, standing around watching shit happen. Instead, members and associates of the Combs enterprises helped conceal the violence and abuse by, among other things, assisting Combs in monitoring and preventing victims from leaving locations such as hotels or Combs residences. These occasions included instances in which a victim was required to remain in hiding, sometimes for several days at a time, to recover from injuries that Combs inflicted without being publicly observed. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise are also assisted Combs in locating and contacting victims who attempted to flee his abuse. Man, this sounds like a nightmare. Like, all joking aside, this sounds like a nightmare. When employees witness to his abuse and others threaten Combs' authority or reputation, Combs and members and associates of the enterprise engaged in acts of violence, threats of financial and reputational harm, and verbal abuse. These acts of violence included kidnapping and arson. In addition, on multiple occasions, Combs threw both objects and people, as well as hit, dragged, choked, and shoved others. When Combs' authority or reputation was threatened by the possibility of negative publicity, or legal or law enforcement action against him, including in or about late of 2023, following public allegations of Combs' crimes, Combs and members and associates of the enterprise pressured victims and witnesses, flip that, including through attempted bribery, to stay silent and not report what they experienced or knew to law enforcement. On phone calls, Combs and other members and associates of the enterprise, among other things, provided these victims and witnesses with a false narrative of events in an effort to conceal Combs' crimes. Combs caused these calls to be recorded on at least 2 occasions. So here we're going to get to the nuts and bolts of the racketeering. So paragraph 13, from at least in or about 2008 through or on about the date of the filing of this indictment in the Southern District of New York, Sean Combs and others, known and unknown, being persons employed by and associated with the Combs enterprise described in paragraphs 6 through 12 of this indictment, an enterprise engaged in and the activities of which affected interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly combined, conspired, confederated, and agreed together and with each other to violate the racketeering laws of the United States, to wit, Title 18, United States Code, Section 1962C. That is, to conduct and participate directly and indirectly in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity, as that term is defined in Title 18, U.S. Code, Sections 1961(1) and 1961(5), consisting of multiple acts involving kidnapping, chargeable under provisions of state law, California Penal Code 207, kidnapping, California Penal Code 21A664, attempt, CPC aiding and abetting, and CPC conspiracy. Multiple acts involving arson, chargeable under the following provisions of state law: CPC arson, CPC attempt, CPC aiding and abetting, and CPC conspiracy. Multiple acts involving bribery, chargeable under the provisions of state law. California Penal Code, bribery of a witness, CPC attempt, again, aiding and abetting, and conspiracy. Multiple acts are indictable under Title 18 of the U.S. Code, Section 1512, relating to tampering with the witness victim. I mean, this dude is trying to pay everybody off. This guy was definitely trying to buy his way out of this shit. Multiple acts indictable under Title 18 U.S. Code, relating to forced labor. Multiple acts indictable under Title 18 U.S. Code 1591 and 2, relating to sex trafficking. Multiple acts indictable under Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 2421 and 2422 and 2, relating to transportation and inducement to travel for purposes of prostitution and other illegal sexual activities. Multiple offenses involving the possession with the intent to distribute or distribution of narcotics and controlled substances, including cocaine, alprazolam, I think, alprazolam, I think that's, what's it called? Valium, I think. 3,4 meth. That's a methamphetamine. All right, I'm not going to try to read these. These 4 bromo, 2 dimethoxyphenol, gamma hydroxybutyric acid. Just give us a street name, bro. Ketamine. There we go. In violation of Title 21 United States Code. I mean, like who comes up with this word? DIMETHOXYPHENETHYLAMINE. Come on. Oh yeah, MDMA. There we go. Thanks. All right. Distribution and possession with intent to distribute, and conspiracy to do the same, aiding and abetting and willfully causing. 14, it was part of the conspiracy that Sean Combs agreed that a conspirator would commit at least 2 acts of racketeering activity in the conduct of the affairs of the Comb Enterprises. Oh, notice of special sentencing factor. Oh. Oh, thank you, Brooklyn. Ecstasy, X. Yeah, why can't they do I don't want to hear the chemical compound names. Just give me the street names. I'm not a scientist in a lab. I'm a lawyer. We use street name shit. Let's go. Okay. Let's read about the special sentencing factor. From or at least in or about 2009 up to and including in or about 2018 in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere as a part of his agreement to conduct and participate in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs Enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity. Sean, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, PD, and Love. The defendant agreed to, in and affecting interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly recruit, entice, harbor, transport, provide, obtain, advertise, maintain, patronize, and solicit by any means a person knowing and in reckless disregard of the fact that means of force, threats of force, fraud, and coercion, as described in Title 18, and any combination of such means would be used to cause the person to engage in commercial sexual act in violation of Title 18. All right, so that's the end of count 1, racketeering. Sounds like they got a lot of good stuff. So count 2, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. I mean, this dude is going downtown. I'm here for it. All right. Grand jury further charges. Now remember, they went to a federal grand jury and they indicted him. So that's where we're at. 16 from at least in or about 2009. Oh, Dizzy, keep an eye on the presser. Thanks, Diz. From at least in or about 2009 up to and including in or about 2018 in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere, Sean Combs, the defendant, in and affecting interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly recruited, enticed, harbored, transported, provided, obtained, advertised, maintained, patronized, and solicited by any means a person knowing and in reckless disregard of the fact that means of force, threats of force, fraud, and coercion, as described in Title 18, Section 1591E2, and any combination of such means would be used to cause the person to engage in commercial sex act and attempted, aid, and abetted, and willfully caused the same, to wit, Combs recruited, enticed, harbored, transported, and maintained a person, victim one, a witness. This is what they needed. They got witnesses. And attempted, aid, and abetted, and willfully caused victim one to engage in commercial sex acts, knowing and in reckless disregard of the fact that victim one was engaging in commercial sex acts as a result of force, fraud, and coercion. Count 3, transportation to engage in prostitution. From at least in or about 2009 up to and including in or about 2024 in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere, Sean Combs, the defendant, knowingly transported an individual in interstate and foreign commerce. This is what I was telling you. This is what makes it federal, with the intent that that individual engage in prostitution. And attempted, aided, and abetted, willfully caused the same, to wit, Combs transported, aided, and abetted, and willfully caused the transportation of female victims and commercial sex workers in interstate and foreign commerce on multiple occasions with the intent that they engaged in prostitution. Now, it's like when we think about, the horrible sex worker trafficking that goes on, you think about like these, over the road semis that have just like sex workers packed in the bag. Like, I don't envision that that's what's going on here. I envision that there was transportation via probably nicer vehicles. I mean, this dude did not give a shit. I love when people get knocked down when they think they're above the law because of their money. Forfeiture allegations as a result of committing the offense alleged in count 1 of this indictment. The defendant shall forfeit to the United States pursuant to Title 18 any and all interests the defendant acquired or maintained in violation of Title 18 United States Code, Section 1962, any and all interests in securities of, claims against, and the property of contractual rights of any kind, affording a source of influence over the enterprise named and described herein, which the defendant established, operated, controlled, conducted, and participated in the conduct of, in violation of Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 1962, and any and all property constituting and derived from the proceeds obtained directly and indirectly, said offense, but not including but not limited to a sum of money in U.S. currency representing the amount of proceeds traceable to the commission of said offense. Okay, as a result of committing the offense alleged in count 2 of this indictment, the defendant shall forfeit, nice little forfeiture clause here, to the U.S. Section 1594, any and all property, real and personal, involved in and used or intended to be used to commit or facilitate the commission of said offense, and any and all property traceable to such property, any and all property, real and personal, real or houses, personal or boats and cars. Boats and hoes, right, Diddy? Boats and hoes. Constituting or derived from the proceeds obtained directly or indirectly as a result of said offense, including but not limited to a sum of money in United States currency representing the amount of property involved in said offense and proceeds traceable to the commission of said offense. The federal government will take all your shit. They will take all your shit through the forfeiture statutes. All of it. Anything that they can connect, $1 that they can connect to any of those properties that was used in any of this shit that he was doing, whoop, government owns it now. That's the way that goes. That's why you hear about it all the time, you know. I mean, it's good. Like, don't get me wrong, it's good business for the federal government. Like, I mean, yes, I'm sure they desperately care about drugs coming into this into this country, but they also love to get the asset forfeiture. They love to get the boats. They love to get the vehicles. They love to get all that stuff. He's going to lose all kinds of shit, including his freedom, which is the most valuable asset that we have, except for maybe our health. Health one, freedom 1A. As a result of committing the offense alleged in count 3 of this indictment, the defendant shall forfeit to the United States pursuant to Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 2428, any and all property, real and personal, constituting or derived from the proceeds obtained directly or indirectly as a result of said offense, and any and all property, real or personal, that was used or intended to be used to commit or facilitate the commission of said offense. Again, Title 18, Section 981, A1C, Title 28, U.S. Code, Section 2461, and any and all real property, real and personal, that constitutes or is derived from the proceeds traceable to the commission of said offense, including but not limited to a sum of money in United States currency representing the amount of proceeds traceable to the commission of said offense. Like federal cases like this is why the feds take so much time. Tracking the money is always a huge part of their game. That's where the interstate commerce comes in, you see. So, in terms of building the investigation, in terms of why it can take months, sometimes years before they charge people that will hear that they're sniffing around. Like, it'll be made public. Like, this one was a few months. It's been months since they searched his cribs, right? They have to go and do all of the digging. They've got to do all of the digging. Oh, that's a good question, Holly Ann. What about the crypto? How does the crypto work? I mean, it's technically not federally sanctioned money. It's a really good question. It's a really good question, actually. I'm going to dig into that. Like, if I was Diddy, I'd convert everything into crypto. Can't take my crypto. It's not even real money. It's like a series of ones and zeros on a computer somewhere, dude. Good luck taking that, bro. Substitute assets provisions. If any of the above described forfeitable property as a result of any act or omission of the defendant cannot be located. Oh, maybe they'll talk about crypto in here. Cannot be located upon the exercise of due diligence, has been transferred or sold to or deposited with a third person, has been placed beyond the jurisdiction of the court, offshore, has been substantially diminished in value, spent it all, or has been commingled with other property which cannot be subdivided without difficulty. It is the intent of the United States, pursuant to Title 18. They're coming to take all this guy's shit. They're taking his freedom and all of his money and all his property. This is like the off with his head type shit. It is the intent of the United States, pursuant to Title 18, Title 21, Title 28, to seek forfeiture of any other property of the defendant up to the value of the above forfeitable property. So they're going to have like a laundry list. So there it is, kids. There it is. That's he's in deep doo-doo, y'all. He is in deep doo-doo. Dizzy, will you make a freak offs emoji? Can we have a freak offs emoji? Dizzy's gonna shut that shit down too. Just be like, nope, no freak offs emojis. All right, fair enough. Okay. Let's see. All right. I want to pull up. I want to pull up the let's double check on this dude here. Okay. There's a little man out there preparing the mics so we can hear it all. See, the feds don't play. They don't need a big stage. Just put a gaggle of mics out there. Like, yeah, we're gonna come out of the building. Allie and I tried a federal civil case right there in the Southern District at 500 Pearl Street. It's right near Chinatown, right there. We used to go to Chinatown and eat after court. Back in the old days. Back in the old days. All right, so I'm going to pull this up. Keep an eye on this. Should be happening pretty quickly. So, how long did the hearing go today on Adelson? So, 2 questions because I didn't see the comments. You guys tell me 2 things. 2 things I want to know. I want to know 1, is trial still going? And 2, what did they do with Rashbaum? What's the deal with him? Is he still what was the ruling on that? Anybody tell me that? I will be grateful for the next 10 minutes. All right. Yeah. So Dizzy, Mandy, and I have not decided if we're just going to stream Adelson. I know Jay's doing it. So I don't know. I don't know what I should do. I don't know. Like I said, I can't go a week without having content. I'm going to do some shorts, like some little vids of us, maybe lives even. Yep, we got it up right there, RC. Got it up right there. Should be happening in about 15 minutes. Let's see, I'm scrolling through to see if anybody's giving me intel. Yeah, for real. I think Freak Off coin is losing all its value. Took a huge plunge in the market today. Huge plunge in the market. Yeah, Dizzy aped. She aced my concept of the Freak Off emoji. What else is new? Mag, it's I got no partner over here. I have to have conversation. This is like me when I'm off camera too, just talking to myself. Oh, look at that guy. He's ready. He's got his man bag on. All right. Let's see. Did anybody give me the answer? I clearly have to. Okay. All right. Oh, for sure. Buckingham Palace is an absolute. Tower of London is an absolute. Kai, what'd you say? I can see it, Kai. Where is it? How far up is it? Ah, perfect. Thank you, Dizzy, for. Donna waived her rights again, and Everett will decide whether Rashbaum needs to be removed when they reconvene. Wow. Now, that's interesting. That is interesting. So when they reconvene, are you talking about today? The question then becomes, if she loses, are they talking about, when you say removed, do you mean from the case or from being able to cross-examine Chuck? That's the big, if they're talking about removing him from the case, saying you can't proceed. There's a conflict of interest. It's a former client. It's going to be testifying. Could be a key witness for the state. And they remove him from the case. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they asked for a continuance of the trial. I don't know. Did that come up? So many questions I have. So many questions. Guy's got some serious soles in those shoes. Carrie, get your mind out of the gutter. No one needs to see me in short shorts. No one needs to see me in short shorts. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna finish Garcia. It's dude, there's 60 episodes. Like, name another podcast that is even close to that in one season. It's coming. I've got to write it. It's not me just in there. Like, those are scripted. It takes time. And I'm busy. I got to try to make a living. So, like, I've got many pokers in the fire. I know too many. I've actually tried to pull some of the pokers out, but one of which I'm really excited about. November 2nd, I've been working on a project with Lauren Pachenko of many top 10 podcasts: Murder in Illinois, Murder in Oregon, Symptomatic just came out. That thing blew up. I'm her partner on this podcast that we're doing. The first episode is going to be dropping November 2nd, called Murder on Songbird Road. It's a good one. Pretty excited about it. It's a big day. It's going to be a big day for Bob. I hope, Wolfie, frankly, to have Garcia done. I'm thinking there's going to probably be 5 more episodes of Garcia. We're at the point in Garcia where state comes after Allison full bore. So we're just getting there. We're getting into the heat of it right now, into the trial. We're on the verge of the trial. I mean, I could make the thing 100 episodes, but I'm not. It's too much. Oh yeah. Spitfire. I was definitely looking at your. Oh, I had a real bummer. So I had an Airbnb that I thought I had set up for the first 3 days. I had like paid for it, and then the person whose Airbnb it was like messaged me. She's like, "Oh, there was that one was already gone. There was like a 2 ships passing in the night situation. Like, somebody had just booked it and it didn't come off Airbnb. So yeah, Steve-O, we're waiting for a presser. Should be imminently. So that's a bummer. So that's just more stuff I have to stress out about. It's always very, very stressful when I'm leaving the business for a week. But like, I want to have so much fun in London. So I've been waiting to go to London for a long, long time. So I'm really excited about it. I can't believe it's in 2 days. 2 days. I was looking at the weather. I ordered Scout and Cameron both cute little raincoats just in case it rains, which I'm sure it will. Didn't look like there was too much, though. Oh, Mag, you always give her you. Thank you for tipping the bartender, also known as the Bob Tender. Appreciate you. Always, always. Oh, Wolfie, you're amazing. I listened to Garcia twice all the way through. I'm invested. I enjoyed it with Gacy. Love, much respect for you, Bob. I appreciate you so much, Wolfie. I know that you just, like, everybody's like that with Garcia. And I'm trying to get him pounded out. Like, I cannot lie. Part of the delay is that my beautiful, brilliant wife, who was an absolute necessity in these next 2 to 3 episodes, I need her on there with me, just is not available for me to record. That's really what's been going on with that. I just, like, she's desperately trying to get this thing done. So that has been a real problem for us trying to get it recorded. So there's no substitute for Allie. You know, like there's no workaround. I'm not going to do AI Allie. Maybe I should do AI. She'd love that. Babe, I had the robots do your voice. Aw, look at this sweet old security guard here. Look at that guy. He's got his big gaggle of keys hanging from his belt. What a sweet old guy. Yeah, I'm gonna have to try to kind of pick and choose what I want to do. We're there for 8 days, which is going to go in the blink of an eye, and 2 of it, really, like the daytime at least, is going to be used up because I'll be sitting inside of 133 Houndsditch or CrimeCon UK. Yeah, I'm super pumped, Steve. Like I'm beyond pumped. Yeah, I like Airbnbs. Like in like the thing that I'm figuring out about London is that unlike America, where we just like everything huge and disgusting because we're gluttons over here, they're far more civilized in the UK. So it's like, oh, all right, we can't do anything. See, now this looks more like it. I was like, what is this gaggle of mics out in front of it? Yeah, this looks more like oppressor when you're bringing down a kingmaker. Like that's what I expect. But like I have to get 2 rooms because they don't have like doubles. They like every hotel I've contacted do not have doubles. So for us, an Airbnb makes more sense. Plus, I just like Airbnbs more to a certain extent. Ooh, yeah. Speedos. I don't fear Speedos. I don't fear them. Yeah, we're thinking about doing the tour. That is on the short list. Allie and I do have a tendency to enjoy not planning everything out. I know that gives some of you stress. Like there's people that want to have every moment of every trip planned out. They know what they're doing. It's not us. It's not how we roll. Never has been, never will be. She is a working woman. She is a very hardworking woman. Oh, thanks, Pokemon. Yeah, I don't blend. I don't blend in. I don't necessarily try to stick out. I'm definitely my own man, like style-wise. Like I fear nothing. Like I'll wear anything I want to wear. I don't care what anybody has to think about it. Either makes not a bit of difference to me. That all comes from having thick skin from being a criminal defense attorney for 20 plus years. Just getting hammered on. What's up, Shiba? See, I said the name right this time. I did it, guys. I'll find one. I've got like a bunch of Airbnbs. Like, cause the thought was I wanted to have an Airbnb that's for the first 3.5 days that is walking distance to the venue that the place is in, because Cam and Scout, I want them to be able to explore. Cameron's 18, so she'll take a little sis and they'll explore around London, and like that area is a great area in terms of being able to walk and check stuff out. So that was kind of my incentive there. And some of these places, but you know how tricky they are. Like on Airbnb is the way they photograph things. It makes everything seem much larger than it actually is. It's very deceiving. I'm switching my television over to this channel. Oh, catalog. Like I'm not going to be covering jury selection. If they come back and we're done with this, if somebody keeps an eye on it and the judge is ruling on what they're doing with Rockbomb, then yeah, I'll jump over there. Black Pumas. Little band, little Austin outfit. All right. Let's go. Sure, I have this unmuted. Love that. We're excited too. What's up, Charlotte? You need to message me back on Twitter so we can plan our thing. I'm short timing. I'm out Thursday on a flight. So let's get it done.
Light test film, Combs press conference, September 17, 2024. Does anybody need me to keep going? Is everybody set in the back? Give me a thumbs up if you're good. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. You just came in from the left. Are you okay? Okay. Thank you.
I don't know, Steve. That's not a foregone conclusion. He is definitely a flight risk. I mean, if they do, he's going to be on heavy-duty electronic monitoring. I'll tell you that. Oh, I don't know who that is. Sounds like it might be 1,000 bottles of baby oil.
Oh, okay.
All right. Everyone's so excited. That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. I mean, it depends. If they're a material witness, Mavka, then government's going to tell them to keep it piped down. That's for sure. If they intend on having that person testifying, if it's going to go to trial. Like, that's the thing with these types of, ooh, you're going to get pictures. Yeah, after they testify both, they'll be free to talk to whoever they want. I mean, I've seen witnesses in federal cases talk prior to trial, but, you know, the feds keep it on lock, though. You know what I'm saying?
That was fast.
Oh, you guys got so lucky so far.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start the Sean Combs press conference in about 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
If you have any questions about presentment, I'll come back out and we'll go over timing and give you a few updates. Thanks.
2 minutes. 2 minutes. Okay. All right, you guys, those of you that aren't premium, were enjoying ad-free because I forgot to turn on the ads. Sorry, I turned them on. Boop. So when they start ripping into your peaceful serenity with the hideous ads they throw, they're the worst. No, Dorsch is actually traveling tonight, Afton, to, if you remember last week, we advised everybody we are not doing a live Dorsch live tonight or next Tuesday because we'll be in London next Tuesday. I'll do a live with Bill from CrimeCon UK because I'll actually be with him in person. He's sitting at the table at our table because like Bill was close enough. I'm like, dude, come to England, come to London. So I got him all set up so he can hang with me at CrimeCon, which is cool. He's excited. He's gonna have his wife. She's gonna be out shopping. Yeah, it's like same, Sharon. It's like I pay for no ads like on everything. Hulu. Like I hate commercials so much. Sorry, Katie. Gotta pay the bills. Like quite literally. All right, let's go.
Morning, everyone. My name is Damian Williams, and I'm the U.S. Attorney here in the Southern District of New York. Today, I'm announcing the unsealing of a 3-count indictment, charging Sean Combs with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, interstate transportation for prostitution. The indictment alleges that between at least 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity, including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and the obstruction of justice. Let me say a little bit more about the charges. The indictment alleges that Combs abused and exploited women and other people for years, and in a variety of ways. As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines. Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically recorded them. The freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time, involved multiple commercial sex workers, and often involved a variety of narcotics, such as ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, which Combs distributed to the victims to keep them obedient and compliant.
See, he used the street.
As alleged, when Combs didn't get his way, he was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs, and that Combs hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims, at times by their hair. On one occasion in March of 2016, that conduct was captured on video and later reported in the media. Specifically, Combs kicked, dragged, and threw a vase at a victim in a Los Angeles hotel when the victim was attempting to flee. As alleged, these assaults often resulted in injuries to the victims, which took days or weeks to heal. In addition to the violence, the indictment alleges that Combs threatened and coerced victims to get them to participate in the freak-offs. He used the embarrassing and sensitive recordings he made of the freak-offs as collateral against the victims. And the indictment alleges that he maintained control over the victims in several ways, including by giving them drugs, by giving and threatening to take away financial support or housing, by promising them career opportunities, by monitoring their whereabouts, and even by dictating their physical appearance. Because of all of this, the indictment alleges that the victims did not believe they could refuse Combs without risking their security or facing more abuse. The indictment also alleges other acts of violence undertaken by Combs and others, including violence against witnesses to his abuse, kidnapping, and arson. The indictment alleges that on more than one occasion, Combs carried or brandished firearms to intimidate and threaten victims and witnesses. Now, Combs did not do this all on his own. As I mentioned, Combs has been charged with RICO conspiracy. He used his business and employees of that business and other close associates to get his way. Those individuals allegedly included high-ranking supervisors in the business, personal assistants, security staff, and household staff. The indictment alleges that those individuals facilitated the freak-offs. They booked the hotel rooms and stocked them with the supplies, including drugs, baby oil, personal lubricant, extra linens, and lighting. When the hotel rooms got damaged, they helped clean it up. They arranged for victims and commercial sex workers to travel for the freak-offs, and they delivered large quantities of cash to Combs to pay for the commercial sex workers. The indictment also alleges that they helped Combs cover up his crimes. During the March 2016 incident at the LA hotel that I mentioned earlier, a member of the hotel security staff intervened, and Combs attempted to bribe the staff member with a stack of cash to make sure that what happened was kept quiet. And as the indictment alleges, in late 2023, after public allegations were made about Combs's crimes, he and others pressured witnesses and victims to stay silent, including by making phone calls to witnesses and victims and giving them a false narrative of what they had experienced. And as alleged, Combs used others to help conceal his abuse by monitoring and preventing victims from leaving a location in order to hide their injuries, or by locating and contacting a victim who had attempted to flee. As part of this investigation, in March of this year, special agents from HSI executed search warrants at Combs's residences in Miami and Los Angeles. They also executed a warrant for Combs's electronic devices. During those searches, agents seized evidence of the crimes charged in this indictment. They seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 defaced AR-15s and a large capacity drum magazine. They also seized evidence of the freak-offs, electronic devices that contain images and videos of the freak-offs with multiple victims. And they seized cases and cases of the kinds of personal lubricant and baby oil that Combs' staff allegedly used to stock hotel rooms for the freak-offs, more than 1,000 bottles altogether. Here are some of the items that we recovered during the searches. As you can see here, this is a drum magazine, large capacity, and it contains, I believe, 59 rounds. I mentioned as well that we recovered 3 AR-15s. This is a close-up shot of one of the AR-15s, and you can see right here, the serial number has been thoroughly defaced. Another picture of more ammunition and parts of 2 AR-15s right there. Now, I want to be clear about 2 things. First, this office is determined to investigate and prosecute anyone who engages in sex trafficking, no matter how powerful or wealthy or famous you may be. No one should doubt our commitment on that. A year ago, Sean Combs stood in Times Square and was handed a key to New York City. Today, he's been indicted and will face justice in the Southern District of New York. Second, we are not done. This investigation is ongoing, and I encourage anyone with information about this case to come forward and to do it quickly. Anyone with information can call 1-877-4-HSI-TIP. I want to express my deep appreciation for the victims and witnesses who have used their voices and helped bring this criminal conduct to light. We would not be here without them. I also want to thank the dedicated case agents on the HSI Trafficking in Person Squad in New York They have been with us since day one and have worked tirelessly on this investigation. They will continue to be invaluable partners to us. I also want to thank the incredible agents and analysts from SDNY who have also provided tremendous assistance on this case. I'm deeply grateful for their continued work. And finally, I want to thank the outstanding career prosecutors from SDNY who are handling this case. Meredith Foster, Emily Johnson, Chrissy Slavic, Madison Smizer, and Mitzi Steiner, and their supervisors, Jamie Backleiter and Jacqueline Kelly. They are members of the Civil Rights Unit in our criminal division. We created the Civil Rights Unit when I became U.S. Attorney. I'm deeply proud of their work on this and so many other cases. I'll now take some questions.
Eric Katursky, ABC.
Thanks, Damian, thanks. The indictment describes aggressive, open, violent, hedonistic abuse that you say was recurrent and widely known. Why did it take law enforcement so long to intervene? How many women were victimized by Sean Combs and how many others were involved?
Look, our investigation is ongoing. We are committed to bringing justice to everyone who's been victimized by the defendant. I can't tell you why it took so long. I think the better focus is on the fact that we are here today. And we are committed to making sure that justice is done. Next question.
Julia Ainsley, NBC.
Thank you for doing this. You said we are not done and that Combs did not do this alone. Do you foresee that there could be other charges related to this case?
I'm not taking anything off the table.
Janet Fisher, Newsday.
What's the difference between the sex trafficking and promoting travel for the purpose of prostitution?
Well, there are different crimes with different elements. I don't think we should get into the nitty-gritty of the legal discussion right now, but the sex trafficking, we believe, they're all serious offenses, but the sex trafficking conduct carries some significant penalties, and we are gratified that we were able to bring that charge.
Is one more coercive than the other?
I'm not going to be able to get into that, but you can look it up, and yes, sex trafficking, especially when it involves coercion or force, is a very serious crime, and it carries significant penalties.
Good afternoon, Darla Miles, ABC7 New York. Thank you for this press conference and for the details. 2 questions. In context of this indictment and the information that was presented to the grand jury, are you able to clarify the number of victims? It's mentioned plural in the indictment, but can you specify the number of victims just for this particular indictment? And secondly, can you provide details about the alleged arson?
Unfortunately, I'm not able to provide either. The number of victims, you are correct. We are intentional in saying multiple. The details of the arson incident are limited to what we have in the indictment and also the detention letter that we filed, which contains more details than the indictment does at various points, but we don't have anything more beyond that. Next question.
Lynn Tran, CNN.
Are any of his accomplices or associates under investigation? And additionally, could he face any more charges?
So the investigation is ongoing. That means both as to him and to anyone else who we believe committed the crime with him. Next question.
Juliette Papa.
Hi, good morning from 1010 Wins. Any indication that some of the women or victims here were imprisoned in his residences, and did he have locations where he kept them, and they were not allowed to leave? And also, he's indicted here, although there were searches and raids in LA, Miami. Why in New York?
Well, I'm biased. I'm the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. I think that we have an outstanding track record of bringing some of the most impactful, sprawling, complex, difficult sex trafficking, human trafficking, labor trafficking, you name it. The Southern District of New York can do it, and so we're very proud of that. And so the scope and complexity of this investigation isn't something that we ran from. It's something that we embrace, and we will continue to do that. As to your question about whether he imprisoned anyone, all I can say is that, I mentioned this March 2016 incident where something was caught on video where a victim was attempting to flee, and there was violence that was associated with it.
Was that at the residence or a hotel?
That was at a hotel.
Matthew Lee, Inner City Press.
Thanks a lot. Does your office intend to seek remand, or are you reaching a bail package? And if you're willing, how would you contrast this with the R. Kelly case in EDNY in terms of the elements? Thanks.
So we will be seeking detention. We have filed a letter laying out our reasoning for seeking pretrial detention. I'm not going to be able to expand beyond what's in the letter, but it contains all of the reasoning, and it contains the law as well. There is a presumption of detention in a case like this, and we think that's warranted.
John Anise, New York Daily News.
Thank you. I was hoping to get some more detail about the searches of his residence, the guns, the cases of lubricant, and the videos. Where were they found amongst his residence? Were they all scattered around the houses in one place? So I kind of wanted to just get a better picture of how that stuff was found.
Well, look, I think that some of the details that you're seeking are in the detention letter. So, for instance, some of the AR-15s, 2 of the 3 defaced AR-15s were found in his bedroom closet in Miami, broken down into parts along with magazines with ammunition loaded in them. So some of that detail is in the detention letter. Beyond that, I'm not going to be able to get into where other items were stored.
Ben Kochman, Post.
Hey, thanks for doing this. Your office was the office that had been prosecuting Jeffrey Epstein before he died.
Hey, thanks for doing this.
I have not read your detention memo yet. It's the first thing I'm going to do after this ends. But does the memo address, or is your office concerned with Combs's safety in custody, given what happened with Epstein?
So we are concerned with anyone's safety whenever they are detained prior to trial. It's part of our obligations to keep people safe as well. It's part of the criminal justice system. So, but I do not draw any sort of connection between Jeffrey Epstein's suicide and what may or may not happen to any other defendant while they are detained pre-trial. And of course, the decision whether to detain the defendant will be up to a judge. Our position is that pretrial detention is warranted under the law and based on the facts of this case. And I'll leave it at that.
Are some of the prosecutors on this case some of the same prosecutors that had been handling that or that worked on the Maxwell case?
So I'm not going to get into the staffing. I will say that this team, this group of AUSAs, this incredible group has been working on this case around the clock, and they've had their hands full. Next question.
Gus Rosendale, NBC News.
Good morning, sir. Combs' attorney said that his client has been cooperative with investigators. He said that this morning. I was wondering if you would have a reaction to that.
Let me just say this. I think that generally and with increasing frequency, the word cooperative or cooperating has taken on tremendous elasticity and no longer really bears any relation to what the word means when we use it in a very specific context. So responding to lawful process and the like does not qualify as cooperation when we use that term here.
Mike Sisak, AP.
Thanks. To that end, was there any discussion of Mr. Combs surrendering? I understand he was taken into custody at a hotel in Manhattan last night, and maybe that wasn't the plan. Can you elaborate on how that came about and why that was?
I'm not going to be able to get into any sort of operational details as to how he was taken into custody and when. He is in custody right now. He will be appearing in court later today.
Was there any discussion of him surrendering, given they claim he's cooperating?
I'm not going to be able to get into law enforcement tactics or operations. Well, I can't get into the charging decision. It is very meaningful to us that weapons were possessed, as we allege in the indictment. Part of the reason why this conduct was so pervasive and harmful was because victims and others didn't necessarily feel comfortable denying him his wishes, as we allege, because of the presence of firearms. I should leave it there.
Thanks. Last question, Jacob Shamison.
Jacob Shamsian, Business Insider. Thank you. Given that he's the sole defendant in this case and that you allege he's part of a conspiracy that involves members of his companies, do you anticipate a superseding indictment that bring allegations against other members of his companies or other co-conspirators as well?
I can't take anything off the table. Anything is possible. Our investigation is very active and ongoing. And I think a lot of you who cover this office know that when we say such things, that developments are certainly foreseeable, but I cannot predict them sitting here today. All right, thank you, everyone.
What part of this business empire is Forfeiture?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I kind of like I don't set eat it in the morning.
All right, so there's that. Stevie Irwin, dude, you need to check your PayPal, bro. Like, seriously. I texted you like 5 times. You don't respond to the text. I mean, you can keep them in the chat, but don't make me post the PayPals that I've been paying you on a live, bro. Paid in full, son. All right, so Diddy's actually looking for the detention memo should be out. So we're gonna look for that.
I work very closely with Thank you.
You mean you're done with the white shot? Hey? Okay.
Go back a hair to your right.
Okay, I'm gonna wait for you to finish. You're cutting.
Get a serial number.
Forget about serial number.
You don't know what this should.
I'm looking at it now, Megan.
¿Eh?
Thanks for that. Valhalla.
¿Cómo fue? ¿Conseguiste parte bien? Sí. No. No. Jimmy, you're killing me, my arm.
The detention memo.
I want to get in front of the thing. I don't want to get sideways. No. No, do it.
It's a different thing than they use in fake court.
No, bro.
The whole system's different in federal courts. So they do a detention memo. Like typically, like they don't set a bond. Like you don't have a bond hearing. You have a situation where if the government wants to keep you in custody, they'll do a detention memo. They'll have a hearing wherein people testify. Like if you're allowed out when in federal custody, you typically need a sponsor, somebody who's responsible for you to make sure that you get to and from court. They vet that person or people very diligently. I imagine when we see this this memo that it's going to be talking about. He's clearly a flight risk. You know, he's got the means to be able to just dip. So, you know, they're going to be trying to keep him in. It's a shame with federal hearings and trials that we won't get visuals. We might be able to get audio probably after the fact. But you know, we're not going to get to see the trial. And the bigger thing is that this will ultimately, like, I wouldn't be shocked if he pled out, you know, because the advantage to pleading in federal cases, like I was saying, when you're trying to negotiate through the use of the sentencing guidelines, the federal sentencing guidelines, it really is a negotiation wherein you're calculating the guidelines, the government's calculating the guidelines. You know, you have some disputes as to certain certain things that will count against you, certain things that shouldn't count against you, and then ultimately they will end up you know, either meeting in the middle, or you know, the government will say, all right, well, we agree that we'll give you the cooperation points off. We'll give you the points off for things like, you know, where you basically you take accountability of your actions. They give you points off for that. So if they can negotiate a deal where kind of the threat of trial, because the threat of trials, if you don't have a plea, you know, there's a higher ceiling in terms of the amount of time he can get. So I mean, there's a downside to going to trial, like where if he gets found guilty, like you saw what, like I forget what Keith Raniere, who was basically, I think if we were to look at the Raniere, the Nexium thing, the complaint against him, it would read very similarly, with the exception of the baby oil and the freak offs. Okay. All right, hold on. All right. So, like, I think Raniere got huge. Yeah, I think they got him back though. He fled, but like he like that's that's an example of why, you know, they try to keep people detained. And once we get through, oh, let's see. Yeah, you're off camera. Let's see. Hold on, Dizzy sent me something. Oh yeah, that's it, Diz. All right, hold on. I'm gonna send that off. All right. So Dizzy found the sentencing memo. Looks like a letter, but it's basically to the judge saying, "Hey, you can't let this guy out. This guy's bad news." All right, let's see here. Let me get it up. I had to email it to myself. Just bear with me. This will have more details than the indictment. They always do. Like if you remember with the Birchmore detention memo, was it really got into all the stuff, all the things. All right, so let me get the camera going. Yeah, no, this is definitely it, Diz. You did it. Did it. All right, let's pull it up. It's kind of a long read. There's some pictures though, so that helps. That always helps. Okay. No, that's not it. Okay. Oop. All right. Okay, so this is it. Okay, so let's go through it. This is why the federal government is going to ask the judge not to allow him to walk the streets while this case is pending. So, dear Judge Tarnofsky, the defendant, Sean Combs, was taken into custody this morning after a grand jury sitting in this district returned a 3-count indictment charging him with crimes related to his decades-long pattern of physical and sexual violence against multiple victims and his use of force, threats, and coercion to enact his will, protect his reputation, and fulfill his sexual desires. The government respectfully submits this letter in anticipation of the defendant's appearance before this court later today and in support of the government's request for the defendant's detention pending trial. As set forth below, there is no condition or combination of conditions that will reasonably assure the appearance of the defendant as required and the safety of others and the community, not to mention the integrity of the proceedings. As reflected by the gravity of the charges in the indictment, the defendant is dangerous and poses an ongoing threat to the safety of the community. If released, he remains a serious risk of flight, despite the conditions offered by his counsel. Most glaringly, the defendant also possesses a significant risk of obstructing justice, meaning destroying evidence, shifting money, doing all kinds of shit. I mean, his people can be doing that too. If they're not shaking in their boots, which they should be. Feds don't play. The feds do not play. Most glaringly, the defendant also possesses a significant risk of obstructing justice. Indeed, as set forth below, during the course of the charged conduct, the defendant has attempted to bribe security staff and threatened and interfered with witnesses to his criminal conduct. He has already tried to obstruct the government's investigation of this case, repeatedly contacting victims and witnesses and feeding them false narratives of events as described in detail below. See, we're going to get the deets here. This is going to be the deets. There are simply no conditions that would ensure that the defendant's efforts to obstruct and tamper with witnesses will stop. The defendant, therefore, cannot overcome the statutory presumption in favor of detention, and the court should order him detained. On September 17th of 2024, an indictment returned by a federal grand jury sitting in with the Southern District of New York was unsealed, charging the defendant with racketeering, conspiracy from in or about 2008 through on or about the date of the indictment in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1962d, sex trafficking in or about 2009 through or in about 2018 in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1591 and count 2. The interstate transportation to engage in prostitution from in or about 2009 through in or about 2024 in violation of 18 U.S.C. 2421A and count 3. That's count or and 2 count 3. So Combs' use of violence, threats, and coercion since at least 2008, the defendant and other members and associates of the racketeering enterprise alleged in the indictment, which includes the defendant's multifaceted business empire, wielded the power and prestige of the defendant's reputation as a musician, entrepreneur, and figure in the entertainment industry to commit federal crimes, including racketeering, sex trafficking, and other offenses. As charged in the indictment, many of those crimes involved the sexual abuse and exploitation of women and other crimes of violence. 1, sex trafficking and abuse. Using the power and prestige of the enterprise, the defendant lured female victims into the defendant's orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. The defendant then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause those female victims to engage in sexual activity, which included frequent sex acts with male commercial sex workers that the defendant referred to as freak-offs. Freak-offs were elaborate sex performances that the defendant arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. Freak-offs occurred regularly from at least in and around 2009 through this year, sometimes lasted multiple days and frequently involved multiple sex workers. The defendant arranged freak-offs with the assistance of members and associates of the enterprise, including employees of his business in the hotel rooms where they were staged often sustained significant damages. For example, it's a footnote. In approximately 2012 in Manhattan, the defendant paid over $46,000 to cover damages to a penthouse hotel room following a freak off. The defendant ensured the victims would participate in freak offs through coercion and violence. For instance, the defendant provided controlled substances, including ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, to female victims so that they could and would continue to engage in freak offs despite fatigue, physical and emotional exhaustion, and pain. Additionally, both during freak offs and separate from freak offs, the defendant subjected female victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse, in part to cause them to engage in freak offs. The defendant hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged female victims, sometimes by their hair. At least a dozen witnesses will confirm that they personally observed the defendant's violence towards women and or the injury sustained by women at the defendant's hand. One incident of physical abuse occurred when a female victim was attempting to leave the hotel following a March 2016 freak off. This abuse was captured on video surveillance and publicly reported in May of 2024. The defendant's assaults often resulted in serious injuries to the victim that took days or weeks to heal. Do you guys want to watch that? It's super disturbing. Like, it'll probably be triggering for all kinds of people. But let me know in the chat if you guys want to watch that. I'll pull it up. It's so warped. Okay, the defendant also coerced victims into participating in freak offs by controlling their careers, finances, livelihood, and or housing, among other aspects of their lives, or by threatening to disseminate recordings of the freak offs. The defendant uses considerable wealth and influence to make victims rely on him financially, for example, by paying for their rent or their cars, or by offering them career opportunities. Once he provided his support, the defendant repeatedly threatened to take it away to ensure the victim's compliance with his demands, including their participation in freak offs. Indeed, victims believed that they could not refuse the defendant's demands, that they engage in freak offs without risking their financial security or career prospects, or without repercussions in the form of physical or emotional abuse, other violence. In addition to the defendant's physical, sexual, and emotional abuse of his romantic partners, the defendant repeatedly engaged in acts of violence directed towards his employees and others. As charged in the indictment, the defendant, often assisted by members and associates of the enterprise, engaged in kidnapping, arson, and physical violence, such as throwing objects at people, throwing people to the ground, and hitting, dragging, choking, and shoving others. Numerous witnesses, including the defendant's employees and others, observed or experienced violence from the defendant firsthand and sustained lasting trauma as a result. For example, in the early morning hours of December 22nd, 2011, the defendant and a co-conspirator kidnapped an individual at gunpoint to facilitate breaking into and entering the residence of another, individual one. Multiple witnesses would testify at trial to the events surrounding the kidnapping and break-in, the latter of which is corroborated by police reports and other records. Approximately 2 weeks later, the defendant's co-conspirator set fire to individual one's vehicle by slicing open the car's convertible top and dropping a Molotov cocktail inside the interior. Police and fire departments reports extensively document the arson and conclude that the fire was intentionally set. Multiple witnesses would also testify the defendant bragging about his role in destroying individual one's car. More broadly, since at least 2008, allegations of the defendant's physical abuse of women and others have been publicly reported in the media, including in Hollywood blogs and on podcasts. Law enforcement reports corroborate that police responded to several instances of the defendant's violence, including assaults against victims and other individuals. More recently, there has been an outpouring of other public allegations against the defendant, including claims of threats and physical and sexual violence dating as far back as the 90s. And this is a list, footnote 3, of some of the other complaints that have been filed, primarily civil claims. In short, the defendant's violent tendencies are widely known. However, at no point during the past few decades has the threat of public exposure exposure or law enforcement intervention deterred the defendant from continuing his abuse. 3, firearms. The defendant and members of the enterprise, including the defendant's security personnel at time, carried firearms, and the defendant himself carried and brandished firearms to intimidate and threaten others. Indeed, some victims were aware of the defendant's access to firearms. On one occasion, the defendant forced a female victim to carry a firearm on his behalf, and on another occasion, he pointed a firearm at a female victim. The defendant continues to have access to guns, including illegal firearms. In March of 2024, during searches of the defendant's residences in Miami, Florida, and LA, California, law enforcement seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 AR-15s, each with defaced serial numbers, as well as large capacity drum magazine. As pictured below in a close-up image, the serial number of one of the AR-15s is visibly bored through and obscured. 2 of the 3 defaced, yeah, you can see he did that there. 2 of the 3 defaced AR-15s were found in the defendant's Miami bedroom closet, stored broken down into parts, along with magazines that were loaded with ammunition as depicted below. One of the AR-15s had a 10-round magazine loaded with 10 rounds of large caliber .223 ammunition, while the second AR-15 had a 30-round magazine loaded with 19 rounds of .223 caliber ammunition. All right, these are pictures. A large capacity drum magazine loaded with 59 rounds of .223 ammo was seized from the defendant's LA residence, as depicted below. Look at that thing. In addition, 6 legally purchased guns with serial numbers, some of which were stored in gun safes, were recovered from the defendant's residences. Although these particular guns, both the legal and illegal firearms, were seized, their presence in the defendant's homes demonstrates the defendant has access to and surrounds himself with both guns and ammunition. Likewise, even if the defendant were personally restrained by the court from obtaining new firearms himself, he could retain access to them through others. That's footnote 4. Certain of the firearms seized during the March 2024 searches were licensed to current members of home security staff. In addition to that individual, during the course of the charged conspiracy, Combs has employed other security staff members with significant criminal history, including violent crimes and firearm offenses. So in sum, the defendant's regular use of violence and threats of violence, as well as the coercion described above against the victims and others, fostered a culture of fear in which these individuals believed that they were unable to reject the defendant's demands without subjecting themselves to physical violence or abuse. And this is where it gets, it's like the flight risk and his ability to be able to get to witnesses. It's like mob style shit, It's like how they'd always have to protect witnesses from, old mob guys because they'd hunt them down. All right, so Combs bribed witnesses and obstructed justice. Throughout the time period charged in the indictment, when the defendant faced the possibility that his violent and criminal conduct could become public, the defendant and other members and associates of the enterprise pressured witnesses and victims not to report what they saw or heard to law enforcement or to otherwise conceal the criminal conduct. For example, as noted above, in March of 2016, the defendant was captured on a video surveillance striking, kicking, and dragging a woman in the public area of a hotel in an apparent attempt to prevent her from leaving a freak off. When a member of the hotel security staff intervened, the defendant attempted to offer the hotel security guard a stack of cash to ensure his silence. After the security guard refused the defendant's bribe, and after coordination between the defendant and his employees, the defendant's staff contacted other members of hotel security. At the same time, staff members were in close communications with the victim of the assault as well, all in an effort to cover up the defendant's assault and prevent the incident from being publicly disclosed. Within days of the incident, the surveillance video disappeared from the hotel servers. Wow. Similarly, throughout the time period charged in the indictment, members and associates of the enterprise reached out to multiple victims on behalf of the defendant to convince them not to report the defendant's abuse. Most recently, in late 2023, immediately following public allegations of certain of the defendant's crimes, namely, it's from Ventura v. Combs, which is a civil case. Like, if you want to get into the real nitty gritty of what this guy does, you got to look at the civil cases. The civil cases where he's being sued civilly, they really get into it. Just the awful shit that he does. Including the physical and sexual abuse of the women. The defendant and the other members of the enterprise made repeated phone calls to victims and witnesses, during which they provided victims and witnesses with false narratives of events in an apparent effort to conceal the defendant's crimes. On at least 2 occasions, the defendant recorded those calls on a co-conspirator's cell phone, thereby attempting to obscure his involvement in the obstruction. C, the government's investigation is ongoing. While the indictment against the defendant was unsealed today, the investigation into, like, one of the reasons that they probably indicted him is to get his ass off the streets. Because, like, part of the battle with what they're going through with him right now is exactly what they're talking about. Him trying to get to witnesses, him trying to hide assets, him just trying to hide all of the things that he's done by paying people off, and that makes it a tougher job for the government. So that was one of the primary reasons. Like, I would not at all be surprised to see a superseding indictment here where they add more charges as this goes, especially once they get him off the streets. Because, like, the other advantage is if he's in custody, they're going to hear every word that he says. He's not going to have a way to contact people, because even if I'm sure he's tapped, like, I'm sure they're listening. But in terms of him being able to get burner phones and connect with people in other ways, obviously that's going to be completely hampered by him being in custody in a federal holding facility. So, as a result of that ongoing investigation, as well as the defendant's charged conduct outlined above, including obstruction of justice and witness tampering, the government is limited in its ability to fully set forth all known details of the defendant's criminal conduct, including details of certain witness testimony. To the extent that the court has additional questions about the charged offense conduct, or any other information set forth herein, the government is prepared to proffer additional information on an ex parte basis. That means without his lawyer or him there, because they don't want to know. Like, they don't want him to know what they know. They don't want him to know who they've got, because if he knows, then he'll try to pay him off. So that's why they like, it's a legitimate argument to do it ex parte, and why they're not naming people in the indictments or in this bail application or this detention memo. Argument: applicable law under the Bail Reform Act, 18 U.S.C. 3141. Federal courts are empowered to order a defendant's detention pending trial upon a determination the defendant is either a danger to the community or a flight risk. A finding of risk of flight must be supported by a preponderance of the evidence. A finding of dangerousness must be supported by clear and convincing evidence, 2 different standards. Preponderance is lower, clear and convincing is a higher standard. Obstruction of justice is another ground for pretrial detention by the courts. Courts in the Second Circuit have held that pretrial detention for obstruction of justice is appropriate as long as the government can establish by clear and convincing evidence that there exists a serious risk that the defendant would threaten, injure, or intimidate a prospective witness or juror. All right, the Bail Reform Act lists 4 factors to be considered in the detention analysis. 1, the nature and circumstances of the crimes charged, including whether the offense is a violation of Section 1591, which it is here. 2, the weight of the evidence against the person. 3, the history and characteristics of the defendant, including the person's character, past conduct, and financial resources. And 4, the nature and seriousness of the danger to any person in the community that would be posed by the person's release. The concept of dangerousness encompasses not only the effect of a defendant's release on the safety of identifiable individuals, such as victims and witnesses, but also the danger the defendant might engage in criminal activity to the detriment of the community. A finding of dangerousness does not require the defendant to have a criminal history, particularly if the defendant has a history of domestic violence. And then they cite a case holding that the prior acts of domestic violence are relevant to a determination of dangerousness because a willingness to strike loved ones offers probative evidence of a tendency to violence and dangerousness towards others. Facts. Evidentiary rules do not apply at detention hearings, and the government is entitled to present evidence by way of proffer, among other means. So, where a judicial officer concludes after a hearing that no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the appearance of the person as required and the safety of any other person and the community, such judicial officers shall order the detention of the person before trial. That comes from 18 USC 3142 E1. Additionally, whereas here the defendant is charged with sex trafficking in violation of 18 USC 1951, in other words, an offense under Chapter 77 of Title 18, it shall be presumed, subject to rebuttal, that no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the appearance of the defendant as required and the safety of the community. Discussion. For the reasons set forth below, the defendant poses a significant danger to the community, both in terms of physical violence and obstructive conduct, as well as a risk of flight. This is especially true given the nature of criminal conduct and the strong weight of the evidence. The defendant, therefore, cannot overcome the statutory presumption in favor of detention in this case. Dangerousness. The defendant is charged with serious and violent crimes. As charged in the indictment, the defendant has physically and sexually abused women and others for the better part of 2 decades. The sex trafficking charge based on the defendant's abusive conduct, count 2, carries with it a presumption of detention. And detention is particularly supported by the facts of this case. Since at least 2008, the defendant has engaged in serious acts of violence, including forcing and coercing women to participate in sexual activity, including sex acts with commercial sex workers, by using physical force, financial pressure, emotional abuse, and narcotics. These acts, described in detail above, were referred to as freak-offs, among other names, and involved orchestrated sexual performances facilitated through drug use that sometimes lasted days at a time. That is not all. As set forth in the indictment, the charges against the defendant capture significant additional violence, both spontaneous and premeditated. On numerous occasions, the defendant assaulted women employees and others when he became enraged by throwing objects at them, choking them, pushing them, kicking them, and slamming them against the walls and onto the ground. The defendant and other members and associates of the enterprise were also capable of premeditated violence, resorting to kidnapping and arson when the defendant's power and control were threatened. The defendant's violence, whether spontaneous or premeditated, had the effect of exerting his continued control over these individuals. The defendant has also carried firearms to intimidate and threaten others. Multiple defaced semi-automatic rifles were recovered when law enforcement searched the defendant's residence in March of 2024, including 2 defaced rifles that had been disassembled and hidden in the defendant's bedroom closet. In short, the conduct with which the defendant is charged shows a pattern of violent and abusive conduct, underscoring his dangerousness. This disposition to violence cannot be reasonably prevented through bail conditions. The violence alleged in the indictment was not isolated or aberrational. It was systemic or systematic and pervasive. The defendant abused women with whom he was in personal relationships, employees, witnesses to his crimes, and others. As described above, the defendant had sexually, physically, and emotionally abused long-term romantic partners for decades, including by forcing them to engage in freak-offs. The defendant has abused countless others in his orbit, and in particular, women, without regard for consequences. Indeed, the defendant's abuse of women long predates the conduct charged in the indictment. To date, at least 5 women have publicly accused the defendant of violent sexual assaults dating back to the 90s. Moreover, the defendant's violence and abuse often occurred behind closed doors, including in his homes, hotels, where he was staying, and other private settings. He has assaulted victims, employees, and others, and even brandished a firearm at a victim in his homes. The alleged sex trafficking similarly took place in private settings not easily monitored. Indeed, in addition to engaging in freak-offs at hotels, the defendant has at times organized freak-offs at his home or at the homes of his female victims. This is precisely the kind of violence that even strict conditions such as home incarceration cannot prevent. In sum, the defendant's long history of violent conduct makes clear that even the most stringent bail conditions will not suffice to ensure the safety of the community. The defendant is a serial abuser who repeatedly assaults and coerces women to achieve his own sexual gratification and uses his vast wealth and position of power in the entertainment industry to conceal his illegal conduct and prevent victims of and witnesses to his abuse from coming forward. The defendant's long-standing pattern of abuse is probative evidence of the likelihood that he will continue to abuse. Indeed, nothing, not even the threat of public exposure or law enforcement intervention, has stopped his abuse. The defendant has continued to physically assault and threaten those around him, including his romantic partners, his employees, and others who happen to be present when he succumbed to fits of rage. No bail conditions can address the defendant's tendency to become violent when angry or emotional. Anyone in his presence is at risk of abuse or assault. And the defendant's physical assaults are serious, resulting at times in serious injury requiring medical intervention and long periods of recovery. Therefore, the nature and seriousness of the danger to any person is both real and specific. And they cite Mercedes there. So obstruction. As part of the charged racketeering conspiracy, the defendant engaged in the obstruction of justice, including bribery and witness tampering. Given the defendant's history of engaging in obstructive conduct to conceal his criminal activity, both personally and through intermediaries, there is every reason to believe that the defendant will continue to engage in such obstruction if released. As detailed in the indictment, following a freak-off in March of 2016, the defendant attempted to bribe a hotel security staff to prevent the hotel security from publicly disclosing and or reporting to law enforcement his vicious attack on a woman attempting to leave a freak-off. The defendant's efforts to disclaim responsibility for that attack continued until earlier this year. A civil lawsuit was filed on or about November 16th of 2023, alleging years of sexual, emotional, verbal, and physical abuse by the defendant, including allegations describing the March 2016 incident. Following the filing of the lawsuit, the defendant stated in no uncertain terms, quote, "Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged." What? What? There's a video, Pinhead. What are you talking about? We all seen it. We seen it, Diddy. We seen it. Through counsel, the defendant vehemently denied these offensive and outrageous allegations, describing the complaint as riddled with baseless and outrageous lies. It was not until the video surveillance video footage of the defendant's attack was leaked to the media months later, the defendant was forced to admit he had in fact perpetrated the, quote, disgusting attack. Clearly, the defendant is willing to deflect, minimize, and lie, do so, and induce others to do so on his behalf to avoid taking responsibility for his own actions. More recently, the defendant has, directly and through intermediaries, engaged in obstructive conduct related to the matters under investigation in this case. Specifically, following the November 2023 lawsuit, the defendant and intermediaries acting on his behalf reached out to potential victims and witnesses to the alleged conduct, including individuals he did not speak to regularly and had not spoken to in years, to attempt to feed those victims and witnesses false narratives about the defendant's criminal conduct. With respect to at least two of these individuals, the defendant's co-conspirators assisted in efforts to protect the defendant. For example, on or about November 19th of 2023, just 3 days after the filing of the lawsuit described above, the defendant made multiple calls to another victim of his sexual abuse and recorded certain of those calls using the cell phone of a co-conspirator. During the calls, the defendant repeatedly asked for the victim's support and, quote, friendship, and attempted to convince the victim that she had willingly engaged in acts constituting sexual abuse. The defendant also assured the victim that if she, quote, needed defended to, she, quote, ain't got to worry about nothing else, end quote. A thinly veiled attempt to coerce the victim into adopting and supporting the defendant's false version of events to protect the defendant. Even more concerning, since learning about the criminal investigation, including following the execution of the search warrants at his residences, Combs contacted other witnesses on multiple occasions, including other witnesses who had received grand jury subpoenas. The defendant's recent conduct is similar to that in the US v. LaFontaine, in which the Second Circuit affirmed the district court's revocation of pretrial release after the defendant in that case engaged in witness tampering. Specifically, the defendant who was charged with multiple counts of fraud in connection with providing false claims to the medical insurers called a witness to, quote, remind the witness that a particular patient had received surgeries that the patient had not, in fact, received. The Second Circuit affirmed the district court's finding that there was no condition or combination of conditions that would assure the safety of the community given the defendant's witness tampering, despite the fact that the defendant's tampering did not include actual violence or threats of violence. So we get some footnotes there. In rejecting the defendant's arguments, the district court's findings of dangerousness was not justifiable. Second Circuit noted that the defendant had fed the witnesses false testimony with the expectation the witnesses would adopt it. And even stringent electronic monitoring conditions could be circumvented. So here the defendant's conduct goes beyond what LaFontaine court found sufficient to revoke bail. Even before being charged with a crime, the defendant has taken numerous proactive steps to tamper with potential witness testimony against him. The government is aware through electronic evidence, toll records, conversations with witnesses, and other evidence that the defendant has contacted witnesses, including subpoenaed witnesses, prior to the dates on which the witnesses were required to appear before the grand jury. In addition, the defendant has recorded calls with at least one victim and provided, either directly or through intermediaries, false narratives of the events that transpired so that those witnesses would adopt that false testimony. Moreover, the defendant's obstructive conduct is made even more alarming by the manner in which he carried it out to evade detection, in some instances by having intermediaries make calls on his behalf, recording certain calls on another's individual's device. These deliberate actions show the defendant was aware that what he was doing was obstructive and that his aim was to evade detection. Even the most stringent conditions, including the monitoring of the court-authorized electronic device, would fail to ensure that the defendant would not engage in this kind of obstruction from his home, including by acting through intermediaries and using others' devices. Given the defendant's history of obstruction, as well as the violent nature of the charges against the defendant cannot overcome the presumption that no condition or combination of conditions can assure the safety of the community. And then risk of flight. Nor can the defendant overcome the presumption that he is a flight risk. The crimes that the defendant is charged with carries significant penalties, carries significant penalties, including a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years imprisonment and a statutory maximum sentence of life imprisonment. The possibility of a substantial sentence is a significant factor in assessing the risk of flight, noting that substantial sentence defendants may face weighed in favor of finding the defendant was a flight risk. So the steeper the potential sentence, the more probable the flight risk is, which obviously makes sense, especially considering the strong case of the government. Here, the defendant is facing at least 15 years imprisonment if he's convicted. This fact alone would provide a compelling incentive for anyone to flee from prosecution. But the incentive to flee is especially strong for this defendant who, at age 54, faces the very real prospect of spending a substantial portion of the rest of his life in prison. As detailed below, the evidence in this case is incredibly powerful. As the facts set forth in the indictment and herein make plain, dozens of victims and witnesses have provided detailed, credible, and corroborated information against the defendant. These individuals include many who personally experienced and witnessed violence and other crimes at the hand of the defendant. Moreover, their accounts are well corroborated by significant extrinsic evidence, including financial and billing records, travel records, electronic data, and communications, including extensive communications by and with the defendant himself. For example, victim testimony regarding freak-offs is at times corroborated by other witnesses' testimony, communications with the defendant and commercial sex workers, travel records, hotel records, videos of the freak-offs, and boy, people would be trying to get their hands on the freak-off videos. Oof. And records reflecting or indicating payment. Similarly, a victim's physical abuse may be corroborated by, among other things, videos of the abuse, photographs of the injuries, reports made to law enforcement, communications with the defendant and others, and testimony from other witnesses who saw or heard the abuse. The vast and varied sources of evidence described in detail below will be compelling evidence of guilt at any trial in this case. Thus, the serious risk of conviction provides further incentive for the defendant to flee prosecution. Moreover, in this case, the risk of flight is augmented by the nature of the evidence against the defendant. The evidence against the defendant, which would be made public at trial, includes substantial evidence that is highly sensitive and has the potential to significantly and negatively impact the defendant's reputation. You think? For example, dozens of video recordings created by the defendant of freak-offs with victims for decades. The defendant has spent significant time and resources ensuring that his criminal conduct avoids public scrutiny. Given the potential penalties here, both incarceration and reputational harm, the defendant has every incentive to flee to avoid prosecution and a public trial. So they have a couple of citations. Incentive to flee naturally bears upon and increases the risk of flight, and the shame of the allegations that he is facing is also an immense incentive to flee. The defendant's incentive to flee outlined above, coupled with the defendant's seemingly limitless resources, create significant risk of non-appearance. The defendant's net worth is publicly estimated to be being close to $1 billion. They had to go to Fox Business to pull that. That's weird. I mean, they're like, that just goes to show how he is shifting money. You know, he's got money in offshore account, like he's got money all over the place. Indeed, the investigation of this case has revealed that the defendant has access to vast funds and resources, including deep reserves of cash. Deep reserves of cash, which would facilitate his evasion of prosecution. At least as of December 2023, the defendant had access to dozens of bank accounts, some personal and many under corporate entities, which contain millions of dollars. Additionally, as of December 2023, the defendant had over $1 million in personal cash on hand. The defendant has traveled internationally several times per year since at least 2006, and since approximately 2019 has owned a personal plane on which he has traveled internationally. The defendant maintains two primary residences in LA and Miami, in addition to his private plane. The defendant owns multiple vehicles in multiple locations. So there's footnote 10 here, which was internationally. Through conversations with defense counsel, the government understands the defense counsel is currently in possession of the defendant's passport, as well as the passports of several of the defendant's family members, and the defendant is in the process of attempting to sell his plane and Los Angeles residence. As explained above, however, the defendant's vast resources make him a flight risk, even without a passport, private plane, or multiple residences. So he has a personal staff, including assistants, security, chefs, trainers, and others who perform tasks at his command. Food, drive, including transporting him, delivering him currency, securing narcotics for him, drugs, and other tasks. He is extraordinarily well connected, both within and outside the entertainment industry. In short, if the defendant wanted to flee, He has the money, the manpower, and the tools to do so quickly and without detection. The defendant's lack of access to his passport or private jet would not negate the fact that the defendant could easily buy his way out of facing justice. Facts. Facts. What are you guys chatting about over here? What's going on? What are you guys talking about? All right. As discussed below, the defense legal team has attempted to mitigate the substantial risk of flight by taking steps such as taking his family's passports, attempting to sell his plane, and reporting his whereabouts to the government. These steps have been taken with the precise goal of crafting an argument for bail before the court. While the defendant may have made the calculated decision in consultation with his attorneys not to flee before any charges are filed, that calculus inevitably changes today when an indictment charging the defendant with extremely serious offenses carries enormous potential penalties was unsealed. He is now, for the first time in his life, facing a mandatory minimum term of imprisonment of 15 years and a maximum term of imprisonment of life, in which the government is prepared to prove the charges against him by, among other things, the testimony of dozens of witnesses and victims to his serial abuse, and evidence from dozens of his own electronic devices and those of his co-conspirators. Given the serious nature of the charges, the strength of the evidence, and the defendant's access to vast amounts of resources, his risk of flight is more pronounced today than it has ever been. So the weight of the evidence, considering the danger and risk of the flight presented by the defendant, the court is also required to consider the weight of the evidence against the defendant. That comes from 18 U.S.C. 3142 G2. The defendant faces a strong and powerful case here, only magnifying the danger he could present to others, especially victims and witnesses ready to testify against him, and the risk that he flees. The evidence in this case consists of a vast amount of victims and witness testimony, electronic evidence, physical evidence, subpoena returns, and other voluntary productions, among other things. As to date, the government has conducted interviews with over 50 victims and witnesses, many of whom saw or experienced the defendant's abuse. Many of these witnesses corroborate one another, and their accounts are similarly consistent with other types of evidence discussed below. The government only expects that number to continue to grow. Truth. People are going to start crawling out the woodwork now that the sucker's in custody. Given that the investigation, which is now public, is ongoing. The electronic evidence is similarly vast. The government has sought to obtain numerous search warrants for such evidence, in addition to obtaining evidence voluntarily from certain witnesses and victims and witnesses. Setting aside devices seized in connection with the defendant's arrest, the government has obtained over 90 cell phones, 90 cell phones, laptops, and cloud storage accounts, as well as over 30 other electronic and storage devices such as hard drives, thumb drives, cameras, and a surveillance system. This electronic data comes from the defendant himself, as well as co-conspirators, victims, and witnesses, and chronicles much of the defendant's criminal activity as it occurs. What a dipshit. Narcissists love to record themselves. The evidence also consists of physical evidence, which was seized pursuant to search warrants executed at the defendant's residence in LA and Miami, as well as his person and the persons of certain co-conspirators. In addition to the firearms and electronics discussed above, the physical evidence also includes other evidence of freak-offs, including over 1,000 bottles of baby oil, personal lubricant. That is never going to not make me laugh. I can't wait. You know, you guys ever seen that movie, Miracle on 34th Street? Trying to prove that Santa's real, and his defense lawyer comes up with the great idea. He's like, oh, all the letters to Santa comes in. Like, are they gonna just wheel in boxes and boxes and crates of baby oil into the courtroom? It'd be great. When I was trying to make a meme, already. I was trying to find just a huge, massive pile of bottles of baby oil. That was going to be the basis of the meme. Finally, the evidence includes records obtained pursuant to over 300 grand jury subpoenas and other voluntary productions. These materials come from over 100 entities and individuals, including communication providers, tech companies, social media companies, banks, and other financial institutions, airlines, hotels, car services, and other travel-related companies, escort services, and even the defendant's companies and wealth management firm. Together, this evidence, as well as the other evidence gathered, powerfully demonstrates the defendant's guilt and counsels in favor of detention. Defendant's proposed bail package is insufficient, so we'll see what his lawyers try to work up here. For all the reasons set forth therein, there is no bail package that can reasonably assure, excuse me, the safety of others in this case, or the defendant has engaged in a decades-long pattern of violence against women and others, and has used his wealth and power to ensure that his criminal conduct goes unpunished through manipulative and obstructive conduct. In particular, the bail package proposed by defense counsel, my voice is failing. So much reading. Imposes measures to prevent and detect obstruction or prevent the defendant from accessing his vast resources, including millions of dollars of cash money, cream. Cash rules everything around me. To evade prosecution or dissipating those assets to avoid financial penalties for his crimes. Defense counsel has proposed certain bail conditions, including home detention with electronic monitoring and a $50 million bond secured by the defendant's Miami property. These conditions are plainly insufficient to address legitimate concerns set out above. In particular, given the defendant's history of engaging in obstructive conduct, the court must reject the insufficient conditions proposed by defense counsel, which do nothing to prevent and detect such conduct. It's true. It doesn't do shit. 50 million bucks for a billionaire, it's nothing. It's like a $50 bill for us regular folk. Doesn't mean shit. Selling his Miami property, or he's going to stay in his Miami property. This guy's getting detained, y'all. That's my prediction. Detained. For example, in U.S. v. Ferranti, a case in which the defendant was charged with witness tampering and where obstruction remained an ongoing concern, the Second Circuit reversed the district court's release of the defendant on bail conditions because the $1 million bond, which was to be secured by properties owned by the defendant and members of the family, only deterred flight, not danger. More specifically, the Second Circuit found the district court's bail condition intended to address witness tampering, which was a general prohibition. The defendant was not to commit a crime or intimidate a witness. Quote, does not at all impede his ability to do so and requires no more of him than that which the law already demands from a defendant and every other citizen. Notably, the defendant's previously proposed conditions do not include provisions related to his access to electronic devices, which, as outlined above, the defendant uses to engage in obstructive conduct. Nor do the proposed conditions include information related to or restrictions on access to the defendant's vast resources, including multiple personal bank accounts in the name of the defendant's business, and deep cash reserves, which could facilitate the defendant's flight. Similarly, the proposed conditions fail to protect against dissipation of assets, which may be subject to forfeiture or penalties on the charges in the indictment. Who dat? Oh, finally, the proposed conditions do not include conditions that would limit the defendant's potential to engage in violence or abuse, such as drug testing and treatment and surrender of all firearms. Conclusion, keep him in jail. As set forth above, the defendant poses an ongoing and significant danger to the community, has repeatedly engaged in obstructive conduct, and presents a serious risk of flight The government respectfully submits that the defendant cannot meet his burden of overcoming the statutory presumption in favor of the House of Pain detention. There are no conditions of bail that would assure the appearance and compliance of the defendant or the safety of others. Accordingly, this court should throw him in jail and throw away the key. Boop. Denied. All right, so there you go. So that'll probably come up today. He's going to be in court today, and they're going to argue the detention today. You know, they've been bickering about this, I'm sure. Oh, the video exhibit. Not so much. All right, so what do you think, kids? What do you think? A lot of reading. All right, so I've been on 2 hours and 35 minutes. I feel like that's ample. What do you guys think? Any questions, any concerns before I dip? I'm gonna go eat some breakfast. It's been an early morning in Diddy world. Talk about freak offs and baby oil. Woo! All the baby oil. I think Diddy owns stock in Johnson & Johnson. Yeah, you know, I should probably get some stock in Johnson & Johnson. Because I'd be buying the fuck out some baby oil, man. I wouldn't be surprised. I think my favorite comment today in here, oh, Nancy, you could never. And Nancy, we're talking the original, not that ridiculous remake they made. I think the most interesting comment made in here was about the concept of crypto. That is really interesting. Like if you were to convert all his money to crypto, I mean, it's not sanctioned by the US government. Man, it's interesting. I'm surprised they didn't say, oh, this guy's going to convert all his money to crypto. And like he'll be on the dark web. Oh, yeah, you know, Katie. You know. Cream. All right, so I'm not seeing much. All right. All right, so what I might do, I might come back later for a little bit of Adelson, depending on what goes on. If there's big news on that, I mean, the Rashbaum thing's big. Like, if he loses, if Donna loses one of her two primary attorneys, I mean, obviously the state's gonna, Georgia's gonna say, no, he's got a lawyer there. That lawyer knows all the evidence. Like that lawyer can try the case. Court could be inclined to grant a continuance. She may not want a continuance. I don't know as I sit here right now whether or not she's waived speedy. With the speed in which this trial is set and apparently is on the eve or is supposed to be selecting a jury today. I mean, I tend to think that she did not waive speedy. Heyo. Oh. You guys see my wife back there? Hi, hon. I said hi. Oh. I think she just thought I said bye. All right. Yes, there is only the original. Can you shut that door so it doesn't squeak for me? Oh boy. I guess it's a hard no. Wow. What do you guys think? I need some WD-40 on that door back there? I think so. In this chair. But I like my squeaky chair. Lets you guys know that I'm alive and well. She did not waive speedy. There we go. So in order for the trial to get continued, she would have to waive speedy. I read about it. Does it say what he says in his tweet? That, like, are you talking about between him and Georgia, where he's worried about the disciplinary committee coming down on him? Yeah, it's a thing. Like, he represented a guy who's going to be a witness for the state against his mother for the same set of circumstances. It's like it's a it's bizarre. The fact that they brought him on is really weird to me. I mean, not only because of the result, which, I mean, criminal defense attorneys lose. It's like they usually have the evidence. It's very rare where you're going to find a defense attorney that hasn't lost more than they've won. It's just facts. Yeah, never forget the baby oil. Never forget the baby oil. So, is that what it is? Diz? Aw, that's so creepy. Oh man. All right, so between me and the team, we will keep an eye on what's going on over there in Donna's case. If anything like dramatic happens, I will probably jump on a live, even though I think Mandy has a thumbnail that she posted in our chat, a Donna thumbnail that I could probably use. So I'm not having to beg the ladies to create a thumbnail for me with no notice whatsoever, which is typically my move. So all right. Thank you to both Meg P and Wolfie Muse for your generosity. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you guys for hanging with us for the weirdness that is Diddy. Off his head, right? Off his head. That's one of those situations where this guy's getting chopped down. Just chopped down. Like I will not be surprised if he pleads out. But if it's a mandatory minimum of 15, like he's probably gonna opt to go to trial. So I mean, because at some point you got to be like, well, because at 15 years he's 54. He gets out, walks out 70, just shy of 70. So, all right, you guys, we adore you. We love you. Mods, I adore you. I love you. I thank you for constantly being here to support us and the channel and the community. You guys are amazing, beautiful human beings, every single one of you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I do. All right, y'all. It's been real. It's been just a fabulous day of Diddiness. Just remember, don't go to any freak offs today. Stay away from the freak offs. And avoid baby oil at all costs. Otherwise, you never know. All right, y'all. Thanks. Because remember, without y'all, just an old man talking about a bunch of cases. Later.